Hello, everybody. So good to have you here. Viva la Frida Kahlo and the colors of Mexico. I wanted to do something very lively and dopamine rich this time. And so I looked up a lot of different Mexican patterns and colors and did a really nice layered piece on this 1970s, 60s, 70s coffee table. And I think I love it. I think it turned out really great. I think it's very lively and fun. I love the colors, of course. And this is also some Mexican pottery that I picked up at some yard sales around here. So you can kind of see how all that blends in. And I just wanted to say that Frida Kahlo was a very influential artist for me and inspiration when I was younger. And surrealism has really touched my artwork a lot. And this piece is mainly just fun and decorative. It doesn't, aside from these funny, moody cats, it probably doesn't have as much to say as some of my other artwork, but I really love it, and I hope you will too. So let's get on to the video where you can see how I made it. So we've got this. I decided to do the base in spray paint mainly because it's really hard to paint those that turned wood. So so I got that. It did take 3 cans of paint for that. You can see that the piece of slate comes off. So I went ahead and glued that down. It does make the table a bit heavy, but I didn't want to have to cut a piece of plywood or something like that for it. And I think this, it's going to be a tight enough bond. It's not like the table gets turned upside down or anything like that very often. So it should work just fine with just some wood glue. This is the Durham's putty for those spots. You just kind of eyeball it, pour some water in there, and then mix it till it gets nice and thick. And I just sort of add that onto there and build it up. And once it's dry, I usually wait like a day for it to dry, and then you can just take some sandpaper and sand it back down. Pretty easy to use. I feel like it's a fairly non-toxic product too, so that's kind of nice. So now I've got her up on her side and I'm just getting started here. I went onto the computer and created these different Frida cats. And I thought they were so cute and lively. So that's going to be my starting piece, my starting area. And I just poured out my, I like the Mod Podge that is matte and not glossy. It's still actually a little bit glossy, but I feel like it's less sticky than the glossy. And I just use my hands and press it in, and there's always going to be some wrinkles in doing decoupage, and it's difficult to get it completely flat. You can use like an ink roller, and that does work pretty well over the top of it too. But it's kind of like you have to watch it during the drying process. And I do tend to go over the top with it as well to seal it in. And that can make sometimes your paper shred. So you have to be a little bit careful about touching it too much once you've put the Mod Podge over the top of it. This part, getting it down nice and flat just using your hand. Same here. Now later in the video, I think I have on here, I showed you, I'm going to be showing you what I painted in the middle spaces, because I originally was only going to do the 3 cats, and then I was like, did not like the way it was turning out, so I painted over those and added 2 more cats to it. So it's cat heavy, let's just say. It's a cat heavy piece. once I get all my decoupage on, then I start putting out my paints. And I use stencils on this, and I was using these different artist colors, and I think for laying down, this is just sort of where I'm laying down a bunch of paint on this sort of mixing mat and then just pressing it onto the wood in sections. I did reload it and I went all the way around the edge. I found this to be kind of a fun, easy way to get a bunch of color down if I'm not really looking for any sort of particular pattern or style. I'm just wanting to add a bunch of paint and colors. You can easily get pretty messy with it. I wanted to wipe it back a little here so I didn't lose all of my the pink in the background. I was also going to tell you that the pink that I used in the back is a bare, like a regular wall paint, and then I had that color mixed, and then I brought it home and added, dumped it into another container and added the plaster of Paris to it to make chalk paint. So in that way, it was sort of a custom color. And those containers, the samples, those cost about $6. And I mean, I got pretty good, that one thing of it did, I think, almost 3 coats of paint on the top of this. This was very dark, the brown. And so that's kind of, it's hard you want to have really highly pigmented paints to cover that up. And chalk paint is usually good for that, or high quality paints. But if you have a lighter color, you might want to put like a primer down first that's a lighter color so that it sort of blocks that your brown woods out. So here I'm painting that edge. Once I got the blue on, I let that dry, and then I collaged all around the edge. I really did like the collage that I had going there, and I feel like I did a little bit cover up some of the collage decoupage papers that I put on there, and you'll see that kind of happening, but it still turned out really good. It wasn't bad, and I did go over that with a stencil. And I just kind of touch up areas that I think need, a little this or that as I'm going around. And I started with the really cool colors when I did the pressing of the paint in there. So I wanted to go over it with the warmer colors and complementary colors so that it'll really make those colors pop. But I will say that when I went to stencil, I was using the artist colors out of the tube, and I thought that those were going to be dark enough, but the pigments just weren't thick enough or dark enough, so I ended up having to repaint over them, and I was having trouble using them with the stencil. So I think my advice would be, if you're going to be using a lighter color over a darker color with a stencil, that the chalk paint is much better. Like an actual commercially mixed chalk paint is going to have more pigment and more a better way to get your get your colors without having to go over it again. So, because that can take you a long time and it might be a little bit tedious. But here's my mix palette and the stencil. So this is going to go over the top here. And you're going to see what I mean. The other mistake I made was that I probably had too much color on the brush, too much paint, and it turned out kind of like not as sharp as what I would like. So, and I think that happened mainly because I was like, oh, I'm seeing that the pigment is not going on thick enough, so I was like putting more on, but that's not really the right thing to do. It'd be better to kind of offload your brush onto a paper towel so that you don't have very much paint on there, and then you are probably going to have to do, you know, a couple of layers over that. But some of the chalk paints that I've used are, you know, pigmented enough that I don't feel like I need to do 2 coats. Like one over the top look pretty good. So I thought that when I had finished with the orange, that it just didn't have enough definition. And so adding this black line around it with a Sharpie, I think just really made it pop a lot better. And then I thought, well, I'll do this. Then now I'll do the blue kind of over the pink and the edges, because the edges seemed like they just didn't have quite enough, it seemed a little blended, and so I wanted something a little with a sharper pattern to go over the top of that. And these ones turned out really good. I did blot my brush on a paper towel, so that worked really well. And then I thought, oh, I need to add a little pop of blue on the edges to kind of define it here as well. It's just the way your eye goes with art. As you're working on things, you'll kind of, you'll kind of see where you feel like something's lacking, and maybe if I add this or that. So, just trust yourself, especially with these acrylic paints, and you can just paint right over the top of it if you don't care for it. You can still see where I've got the background there, but here I went ahead and went right over the top and added the extra cats. And I think that was the right decision. There's just way too much going on in those panels. And I mean, you can't have enough cats, really. I mean, isn't that the way it is in life? They're just so cute. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.